It's Tuesday, so that means it's time for another top 10 video. This time we're going to be picking the runner-up from last week's one that my patrons voted on. I was busy with storm-related response due to Hurricane Isaias that came up the East Coast, so I needed to basically pick the runner-up. They picked Homebrew World Creation Tools last time. This was top 10 worst magic items for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So I do have a couple of qualifying rules as to what can be chosen for this list. So if you'd like to see what that is, stay tuned. It's a pretty bad magic item. Gamer glasses. Remember when everybody used to wear these all the time? What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and let's get those qualifiers out of the way so we can dive into the list. So it needs to be an official magic item from an official D&D source. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean not Unearthed Arcana, I mean not Homebrew, and I mean it needs to exist in something published by Wizards of the Coast. So that means whether it's a physical printed book like this, or one of their Extra Life released adventures, something like Infernal Machine or War Machine Rebuild, Lost Laboratory of Qualish, the Tortle package, any of those things that have come out that are official published sources by Wizards that you just have to pick up digitally because they don't have a physical printing. It has to be one of those. It could not be a cursed item because I figured a cursed item is its own category of bad. This is just a magic item that is subpar, or you're not getting a lot out of it for the investment of attunement or something like that. And I also decided to remove common magic items because common magic items aren't really bad. They're just commonplace. That's the whole point of it. So they're not like over the top great. And yes, you might have a common magic item that requires attunement, but you know it's a common magic item. It's not like you're spending an attunement slot for something you could get at first level in a given class or something like that. So I hope that makes sense, and I think it will come out as we do the list, but I don't know. It's also my top 10 list of worst. It's opinion. It's a top 10 list. That's what they are. I don't know why I have to explain that to people, but I seem to have to do so. Number 10. Saint Markovia's Thighbone. I realize this one's kind of a little funky, but I absolutely hate this magic item, so I wanted to put it on the list. Yes, it's specific. Yes, it's Curse of Strahd, but there's been a lot of Curse of Strahd focus lately, so I guess maybe spoilers for Curse of Strahd, sort of. But the book's been out for 4 years, so if you don't know by now, I'm sorry. But it's a magic item contained in that book, but it is a magic item, so in theory you could put this in your own game and change the saint and whatnot. But let's talk about why I think it's a worst magic item. So it has the properties of a Mace of Disruption. I really like Mace of Disruption as a magic item. I like taking its properties and applying it to other magic items, but all in all, not bad. But you are playing in Curse of Strahd, right? Who's the main villain in Curse of Strahd? Strahd. What is Strahd? A vampire. What else exists in Barovia and in several places? Random encounters and other things? Vampires. If the Saint Markovia's Thighbone scores one or more hits against a vampire or a vampire spawn in the course of a single battle, it crumbles into dust once the battle concludes. Let's talk about this. You know what? If we read the lore, it's even worse. So Markovia followed her heart, became a priest of the Morning Lord. She proved to be a very charismatic. Age of 30, she gained a reputation of allowing no evil to stand before her. So a pretty powerful force of good in the Church of the Morning Lord. She long considered Strahd a mad tyrant, but only after his transformation into a vampire did she dare to challenge him. As she rallied her followers and prepared to march on Castle Ravenloft, he sent a group of vampire spawn to her abbey. They confronted her and were destroyed 2-1. Suffused with confidence born of righteous victory, Markovia advanced on Castle Ravenloft. A great battle raged from the catacombs to the parapets. In the end, Markovia never returned to Barovia, and Strahd long afterward walked with a limp and a grimace of pain. It is said that he trapped Markovia in a crypt beneath his castle, and her remains linger there yet. The essence of Markovia's saintliness passed partly into her bones as the rest of her body decomposed. Her remaining thigh bone is imbued with power that inflicts grievous injury on the undead. So that is an amazing piece of lore. I love that, and I think that that's really, really cool. And like the fact that Strahd technically, as he stands, has a limp because this badass saint priest lady just messed him up hard, and he still walks with a limp. So you pick up this epic saintly weapon, and you're I think you find it in Strahd's castle because that's where her remains are. Again, maybe spoilers, but you pick this thing up and you're like, oh man, this thing is great against undead. Boy, I hope I only hit it one vampire with it one time and that's it. Because once I do, it crumbles to dust and it's gone forever. I can beat the crap out of any other undead. I can beat the crap out of any other creature with this Thighbone, but the second it touches a vampire, it crumbles to dust. It seems like it should be a vampire killer weapon, given that its lore dictates that it's so good at killing vampires, or she was so good at killing vampires. So again, I'll give you the Mace of Disruption real quick. Hitting undead or a fiend, it does an extra 2d6 radiant damage. Again, super good. If it has 25 hit points or less, it makes a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw, or it's flat out destroyed. And if they, on a successful save, they still become frightened of you to the end of your turn, and it sheds light. So it's good. It's an undead fiend slaying weapon. But you're in Strahd's castle. There's no shortage of vampires in Strahd's castle. In fact, there's some pretty nasty ones in there with his brides and himself and whoever else. And if you hit them, one of them, you could get into a fight with 4 vampires and one of them is Strahd. And you're like, well, let me take out the lackeys before I get there. Hit him with the Thighbone and it crumbles to dust. Once the battle concludes, I will point that out, once the battle concludes. So if you're in a fight, in theory, with Strahd, you could be wailing on him with this Thighbone the whole time. But as soon as the battle ends, it's destroyed. So you better know somehow that this Thighbone will... I don't know if that's a thing you learn from attuning to it. Maybe, as you save it, but you have to attune to the magic item to use it. And you're like, well, I've got this magic item I'm attuned to. Can't use it till we get into a fight with Strahd, though. I don't know. I just think the concept of a magic item that has an inborn destruction to it after its use for its primary purpose seems like a waste. Number 9. Mask of the Beast. This uncommon magic item was found in Tomb of Annihilation. It looks badass. It's like a tiger mask. And you can expend as 3 charges. While wearing it, you can expend a charge to cast Animal Friendship as an action, and it gains all charges back daily at dawn. The reason why is this is something you can find pretty early on, and Animal Friendship, in my mind, is not a super useful spell, especially in Chult, where everything wants to kill you. And a lot of the times you think you might find something, and it's actually an undead version of the thing you found, therefore it doesn't work. It lets you convince a beast that you mean it no harm. Choose a beast that you can see within range. If you can see and hear you, its intelligence must be 4 or lower. Otherwise, it must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be charmed for you by the spell's duration. If one of your companions harms the target, the spell ends, and you can't upcast it. So one thing I did want to look up because I forgot about it, so we're going to check it right now, is this does not provide you a spell save DC. And there are specific rules, and I remember reading them when I was doing my magic item coverage, but there's a specific rule, and we need to know this because this does apply to future magic items. So let's go ahead and see if we can find it while I'm talking to you here. But certain items that require a spell save will say things like, it uses your spell save DC. Now, or it'll say it has a set DC of 15. However, certain magic items don't list it, and as such, it has it uses a standard number, and I think it's relatively low. Okay, the spell is cast at the lowest possible level and caster level, doesn't expend any use of its spell slots, requires no components. The spell uses its normal casting time and range, duration, and the user must concentrate if it requires concentration. Many items, such as potions, don't. Certain, magic items such as certain stats may require you to use your own spellcasting ability when you cast a spell from the item. If you have one or more spellcasting ability, you choose which one to use with the item. If you don't have a spellcasting ability, perhaps you're a rogue with the use magic device feature, your spellcasting ability modifier is 0 for the item, and your proficiency bonus does apply. So that means it is going to be, your proficiency bonus does apply, but your spellcasting ability modifier is 0. So we know that the calculation is 8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier plus your proficiency bonus. So at level 20, the highest you can get if you don't know how to cast any spells will be a 14. 8 plus the proficiency bonus of 6. So that's where you're at. So again, when you probably get this mask early on, if you don't have a spellcasting ability modifier for this, because it doesn't say that it uses one, it's going to be 10. So it's an animal friendship with a DC of 10 and a land of Chult where everything wants to eat you. And I feel like that's pretty easy to overcome. And that's something I feel like is something to consider a lot, folks, when you're making magic items or getting magic items. That if a magic item doesn't specifically say that it uses your spellcast, or it doesn't say the spellcasting ability or the DC is this, if you look at the spell that it will allow you to cast, it will say it uses your spellcasting ability modifier. And yeah, that's what it says, right? Yeah, wisdom save for the spell's duration. So if you don't have one, it's probably not the best thing for you to hang on to it. Something to consider. Number 8. Mace of Terror. This is a rare magic item that requires attunement, and I absolutely hate this thing. There is a little bit of inborn bias, and I'll tell you the story at the end, but let's talk about it. So it has 3 charges. You can expend a charge to release a wave of terror. Each creature of your choice in a 30-foot radius extending from you must make a DC 15 saving throw or become frightened of you for 1 minute. While frightened in this way, a creature can spend their turns trying to move as far away, must spend their turns trying to move as far away from you as they can, and can't willingly move to a space within 30 feet of you. It also can't take reactions. For its action, it can only use the dash action or try to escape from an effect that prevents it from moving. If it has nowhere it can move, the creature can use the dodge action. At the end of each of its turns, it can repeat the saving throw, ending the ending the effect on a success. It gets 1d3 charges daily at dawn. So this is essentially like the fear spell, more or less, in a mace, but the mace provides you no benefits to hit. It does require attunement. And all you can basically do is hold the mace up and use your action to use this fear effect. The DC is 15, which is good at low levels, but then things start to get better at the DC. And Frighten is a pretty easily resisted condition. A lot of things are immune to Frighten. So I don't know how useful this mace is going to be for you in the long term. The only benefit of it, I'd say from early on, is it's a magical mace. So you can use it to deal magic damage and bypass magic resistance. I think the effects that it lists here, can't use reactions and all that stuff, is what the fear spell does. I mean, I guess I could just look up the fear spell and then we'd find that out without having to guess. That's feat. Let's look up fear and just see. Become frightened, mistake the dash action and move away as far as possible. It ends its turn in a location, doesn't have sight, make a wisdom saving throw. Okay, so it must just use its dash action to get away, the safest route. Here it does have some qualifiers where it can't use reactions. That's something different. So this is a little bit better, but the main reason that I don't enjoy this is in a game, the very first 5th edition campaign I was playing in, the DM gave us some downtime, and basically if we rolled well enough, we were able to gain any type of rare magic item of our choice. And one of the players in our group, the cleric in our group, chose the Mace of Terror as his rare magic item. He never once swung it to hit, and he never once used it for its fear effect, so I don't know why he took it. It was a dragon-based campaign too, so fear effects were pretty common. So a lot of things were good at resisting it. So I don't know, I just, like, he could have taken a +2 mace and it would have been more useful. But he was also a Tempest cleric, so he had proficiency with martial weapons. And he was a dwarf, so he had proficiency with weapons as well. So he had plenty of other options. And if you have things like an axe, actually he had an axe, and that's what he used as his primary weapon, but he chose this mace that he attuned to and never used. Number 7. The Balance of Harmony. This is one you're probably unaware of because it's only in one of the adventures contained, man, they are loud upstairs, inside Tales from the Yawning Portal, and this is the hidden shrine of, I think it's Temoacan is how you're technically supposed to pronounce it. It's this sort of Aztec-themed adventure. It's a dungeon crawl. And this is one of the items you find, and it's uncommon. It doesn't require attunement, which is nice. And it's a scale, right? Which is a cool magic item. I like the idea of like scales, like a merchant scale. That's like a cool theme, especially for like a justice type character. You can use the scale to cast Detect Evil and Good as a ritual. Okay, Detect Evil and Good. Let's take a look. Detect Evil and Good is a concentration spell, typically. It does not have the ritual tag normally. It's an action to cast, and you know if there's an aberration, celestial, elemental, fey, fiend, or undead within 30 feet, as well as where it's located. Similarly, you know if there's an object, is there a place or object within 30 feet of you that has been magically consecrated or desecrated. And then it has the typical detect magic penetration where you can't go through lead and stuff like that. But yeah, if you want to cast it as a ritual, you must place the scale down on a solid surface, so you have to have access to that. Then sprinkle the pans with holy water or place a transparent gem worth 100 gold pieces in each pan. So I guess sprinkling with holy water is the better option because it's cheaper. The scale remains motionless if it detects nothing, tips to one side or the other for good, concentrated, or evil, desecrated, and fluctuates slightly if it detects a creature appropriate to the spell, but neither good nor evil. By touching the scales after casting the ritual, you instantly learn any information the spell can normally convey, and then the spell ends. So a one-action first-level spell you've now turned into a 10-minute spell with a potentially 200 gold piece material component cost, which the original spell does not have. You don't get to, it doesn't consume them, but then like it's kind of fuzzy what everything actually does. So I guess it's uncommon and it's non-attunement, so I guess you could use it because it's non-attunement, but it just seems like more trouble than it's worth. Number 6. Gloves of swimming and climbing. I honestly didn't even know that these existed, if I'm being honest with you. I forgot about them. They're an uncommon attunement magic item, and while you wear them, swimming and climbing doesn't cost you extra movement speed, and you get a +5 bonus to athletic checks made to swim or climb. There are other magic items I feel like that are better, that give you swim speeds or climb speeds that don't require attunement. This gives you the benefit of both, which is nice, but most of the ones that give you a benefit of a swim speed also give you the ability to breathe underwater. And like, I'd rather have boots of spider climb or slippers of spider climbing that give me the ability to walk upside down on ceilings for an attunement slot than not it costing me not extra movement and me still having to use my physical strength to be able to climb or swim. Number 5. Any kind of +1, +2, +3 ammunition. I'd rather have a +1, +2, +3 bow, crossbow, or whatever that will provide me that benefit on every single attack that I make. Yes, I understand if I technically have a +3 longbow and a +3 piece of ammunition, I have a +6 to attack and a +6 to damage, but I live in a world, and I'm sure a lot of you do as well, but maybe I'm wrong, where I don't really track ammunition. Like, I'll go to a town, or if I have my players go to a town, I'll be like, hey, you guys gonna buy arrows? And they'll just spend some gold and buy an absorbent amount of arrows, and I'll be like, we're fine, you're good, you got it covered. I don't necessarily be like, what do you got, 20 arrows left? You better track it, that was 19, you just fired one shot. That's just, I mean, maybe that could be really fun, and if there's a better way to do it, maybe. But, you know, I'm an archer lifelong, and I've had a big round quiver that I made out of leather that could hold like 40 to 50 arrows in it if I really wanted to. And that's an exorbitant amount of arrows, but I highly doubt, and I mean, in any combat, do you really fire 40 to 50 arrows? Maybe you fire 20, maybe 40 based on the different turns, and if it's a really epic battle, maybe. But I typically don't track ammunition regularly, and I just feel like, in my mind, tracking special +1 ammunition would just be a pain in the ass. Because it's something that you could easily forget session to session unless you make notes. And then, like, what if you have +1, +2, and +3 ammunition? If it's something like an arrow of dragon slaying, you typically have like 1, maybe 2, so you know what it is, and it's like it has its one purpose and then it does that. But the +1 ammo, I don't know, I just don't see any real, I don't like it. But I have yet to get a chance to play like a really good archery type character, which is something that I really love to do and was one of my favorite old characters from an old edition. And I just don't have enough games to play in. And, you know, I don't feel like people like archery and bows and that kind of stuff in 5th edition as much as I do. So I don't really get a chance to play and enjoy it. Number 4. Eyes of Charming. These look cool. I like the design of them. They fit over your eyes. They're a pair of lenses. 3 charges, and you can expend a charge as an action to cast the Charm Person spell with a DC of 13. On a humanoid within 30 feet of you, provided you can see the target and The target can see each other. Wait, on a humanoid within 30 feet of you, provided that you and the target can see each other. So you need to be able to see one another, and the all charges come back daily at dawn. Well, again, Charm Person as a spell is a first level spell. It is still the same amount of time to cast. It's still the same distance. And let's see. I don't think you attempt to charm a humanoid you can see within range. So when you cast Charmed Person as a spell, they don't have to be able to see you. You just need to be able to see them. This requires attunement, and it's also a DC 13. So that's, let's see, at level 1, that's presuming a 16, an ability score that's a 16, which is easily achievable. So you, as a spellcaster, could cast Charm Person at a DC 13 as long as you have a 16 in your spellcasting ability, and then you will very quickly outclass these lenses to the point where they become almost useless later on. And the fact that you need to see them and they need to see you for this to work also means, like, if it fails, they're like, hey, mate, you just tried to charm me, and I saw you do it because of your funky glasses. Whereas you could be, like, hidden behind something and be like, I charmed that guy. And they might be like, whoa, what was that? And then you're like, well, I don't know what that was. Anyway, sorry about the absolute cacophony that's happening upstairs. That is why I am building a studio on the other side, which I will be recording and filming for all of you to see. A completely soundproof studio, so we don't have to hear kids screaming, jumping off couches, or literally just walking. That was literally walking, not even running, that you just heard. Number 3. Staff of the Python. In theory, I really, really like this magic item. I think it's really cool, but I also, as I've stated before, think a magic item with a built-in means for it to be destroyed forever very easily is a bad idea for an item, especially when the only thing that item does has the potential to get it destroyed. So it's usable by a cleric, druid, or warlock only and requires attunement. It's a kind of funky mix of classes. And basically, you use an action and you throw your stick and it turns into a giant constrictor snake. If you're unfamiliar with giant constrictor snakes, they are one of the best animals you can summon with conjure animals, assuming your DM lets you pick. But basically, it has 12 AC, 60 hit points, but the big thing you want here is the constrict. It's an attack, it does a +6 to hit, does 2d8 +4 bludgeoning damage, so that's a pretty solid amount of damage. And when it hits someone, they take the damage, they're immediately grappled. And the benefit is, while they're grappled, they're also restrained, and then it's a DC 16 every turn to try to break out of it. And again, as a reminder, restrained, set your speed to 0 as part of grapple. Attack rolls against them have advantage, and attack rolls that they make are at disadvantage, and they have disadvantage on Dex saving throws. So the good news for that is you can have your snake attack somebody, grapple, restrain them, and then your whole party will have advantage on the attacks they make. Let's talk about why it's bad, though. Oh, I should say it's a bonus action to turn it back into a staff, and then on your turn, you can mentally command it within 60 feet. You decide what action it'll take, where it moves on its turn, and or you could issue just like a general command, stay and guard a location. It doesn't actually say it becomes under your control, has its own initiative count, so it does its own thing. You don't have to use an action to command it, which is great. However, here's the problem. If the snake is reduced to 0 hit points, it dies and reverts to its staff form. The staff then shatters and is destroyed. If the snake reverts to a staff before losing all of its hit points, it regains all of them. So that's good. You just have to be super critical and mindful of your snake's hit points. Because if it goes out and it gets attacked, then you could, in theory, use a bonus action. Bam, it's back into a staff. Action, now it's a snake again with full hit points. So that's something to keep in mind. You can go from snake to staff, back and forth, turn to turn, and you can keep bamfing up its hit points to send it back out again. It doesn't have, it doesn't have any charges, and the charges don't, so it can just, that's what it does. It's a snake, the snake does a thing, bonus action, it's back to a staff, action, it's a snake again. So you can just do that as many times as you want, that's unlimited. However, 12 AC is easily hittable, and at higher levels, depending on what things can do, 60 hit points isn't that much. And again, it's an action to send it out to use it, and a bonus action to call it back. I guess in theory, you could throw it out, have it do its thing, and then call it back as a bonus action, but it does say it gets its own initiative count. So in theory, you can't do that, have it attack, and then call it back. It does its own thing on a separate initiative. So I mean, 60 points of damage in one hit is not something that'll probably happen too often, but all it takes is it to take like a couple little ticks here and there, and then all of a sudden one big crit, and your staff is destroyed. Number 2. Helm of Brilliance. And you may be saying to yourself, Ted, why is that on this list? This is a super powerful magic item. It's really good. I've seen them use it on Critical Role and other things like that. It's great. Have you ever actually read what this thing does? A lot of people read the majority of the bullet points and then they stop reading. And unfortunately for you, as the potential owner, after the bullet points is where the bad stuff comes in. So it has a bunch, it's very pretty, it has a bunch of diamonds and gems in it. Diamonds, rubies, fire opals, and opals. So that's cool. And if you peel a gem off, it does a thing. So you can use an action to cast spells from it with a DC 18. That's a pretty high AC. It is Daylight for an opal, a Fireball for a fire opal, Prismatic Spray for a diamond, and Wall of Fire for a ruby. Once you pluck that off, it is destroyed and gone. So first of all, the gems in theory are randomly generated. So if your DM is rolling those ahead of time and maybe rolls poorly, or has you roll and you roll poorly, first of all, this is a very rare magic item that requires attunement. So it might not have a lot of uses because those are missing. And again, each time you're casting a spell, you're depreciating the value of your helmet further. As a long rest, as long as it has one diamond in it, it emits dim light in a 30-foot radius when at least one undead is within the area. Any undead that starts its turn in that area takes a d6 radiant damage. Well, that's good. So it's an undead. It'll let you know there's undead around. It'll also make you a glowing beacon that there's undead around, but they'll take damage in that radius. If it has one ruby, it gives you fire resistance. Well, fire resistance is pretty useful. And as long as the helm has at least one fire opal, you can use your action and speak a command word to cause one weapon you're holding to burst into flames. They emit light, as fire tends to do, and are harmless to you. When you hit it with an attack using the blazing weapon and the enemy takes an extra d6 fire damage. The flames last until you use a bonus action to speak the command word again, or you drop or stow the weapon. So the good news is the diamond, the diamond that gives you undead kind of pinging ability and extra damage to undead, the resistance to fire, and the lighting a weapon on fire to deal extra damage are all things that do not expend the gems. The spells are what does that. But here's this kicker and the bad part. Roll a d20 if you're wearing the helm and take fire damage. Roll a d20 if you're wearing the helm and take fire damage as a result of a failed saving throw against a spell. If you take fire damage as a result of a failed damage roll against a spell or saving throw. So remind you, it says failing a saving throw. So in theory, if you succeed on a saving throw against something like a fireball, then you're fine. On a roll of a 1, the helm emits a beam of light from its remaining gems. Each creature within 60 feet of the helm, other than you, must succeed on a DC 17 dexterity saving throw or be struck by a beam, taking radiant damage equal to the number of gems left in the helm. The helm and the gems are then destroyed. So, fire damage, super common in 5th edition. A lot of things deal fire damage. If you don't have a great dexterity, so I guess in theory, if you are a rogue or a monk who's wearing this helm, then you're probably okay. Because with evasion, chances are you're going to do all right. But even if you fail with evasion, you're still going to take half damage. So you're still going to get the effects of this. And if you happen to roll a 1 on your helmet, it will immediately deal damage to each creature, including your allies, and then it just disappears forever. I don't like that. Again, it's another item with an inborn mechanic, and I feel like I've seen a ton of people that in various games I've played in get a Helm of Brilliance take fire damage, and the thing that happens more often than not is no one makes them make this saving throw or roll because they don't read that part and they never pay attention to it because they just read the bullets because that tells you all the things, and they just assume the bottom is like, oh, it's charges, just whatever, that's how it recharges, but they don't. So I don't know, I don't like it. I mean, if I had it in a game, would I wear it? Sure. If I was a low dexterity character, would I be worried about accidentally killing my friends and losing my helmet? Also sure. Number 1. Ioun Stone of Language Knowledge. So this is an Ioun Stone added from Last Laboratory of Qualish. So that's something to consider. So it's not in a book, it's in an adventure, but that adventure added new spells and creatures and things to the 5th edition canon, so it does count. First of all, it's an Ioun Stone, which Ioun Stones in themselves have sort of a weird funky thing in that they're one of the only magic items that can just be flat out taken from you or destroyed again. So I'll read about Ioun Stones and then we'll talk about the item. So use an action to throw it in the air, or I guess you keep an action and it kind of it spins, it orbits your head in a range of a d3 feet. You must use an action to grab it or net it to separate it from you, either by making a successful attack against a D. So another creature can try and take this from you. They can try and grab it, they can try and net it by making an successful attack roll against AC 24 or a successful DC 24 acrobatics check to seize the stone, ending its effect. So AC 24 and DC 24 for the attack roll or the acrobatics check to grab it is high. Don't get me wrong. It's doable, but it's high. But in theory, if they grab or net this thing and take it from you, you immediately lose its effect. So your whatever it bestows upon you, it's gone. The stone also has an armor class of 24 and 10 hit points and resistance to all damage. So if someone throws a fireball at you and it blows up, the Ioun Stone, if they roll 20 damage or more on that fireball, the Ioun Stone doesn't have a dexterity, so it immediately fails its saving throw. Sure, it has resistance to all damage, but it only has 10 hit points. You get hit with a breath weapon, you get hit with a spell, some sort of AoE effect, and in theory, if your Ioun Stone is orbiting your head and it takes 10 damage after that resistance, your Ioun Stone is destroyed, and then it's gone for good. The only thing it says here, it is considered to be an object that is being worn while it orbits your head. So things that don't affect stuff that's being worn or carried, it doesn't affect that, or things that don't affect objects, right? Certain spells only affect creatures, not objects, but Fireball does not discriminate. So in theory, a 20 damage Fireball, which is lower on the Fireball scale, immediately destroys your Ioun Stone if it's orbiting your head. So all of those are downsides of Ioun Stones in general, but let's see what the Ioun Stone of Language Knowledge does for you. You learn one additional language while this orbits your head. The DM chooses the language it bestows upon you. This, folks, on top of all those negatives I just talked about, is an attunement slot. You're going to use an attunement slot to have a magic item that can be stolen or destroyed from you, and all it does is give you a language. And you don't even get to pick what that language is, which is also potentially another downside because it depends on your DM. Is your DM benevolent and nobody in the party can speak Draconic and you're dealing with a lot of people who can and they make it teach you Draconic, so that's a benefit to you? Or does your DM just roll on a table or just purposefully choose something that's probably not going to be useful to you? I don't know. I don't know your DM. I hope they're not vindictive like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if some DM out there is and just picks something that they don't think will come up. Or, I mean, I think more realistically, if you roll it at random, or just pick. You're like, yeah, well, you're super useful if someone knew Draconic. Ioun Stone that teaches Draconic. But again, downsides. So, thank you all so much for watching. Again, I don't really love doing worst videos here, but that's what people voted for out of the pre-written list that I come up with. So I take a bunch of topics that I have in a Google Drive document from suggestions people have made. Also, feel free to leave suggestions in the comments down below for future top 10 videos you'd like to see. And I throw this up on my Patreon typically a week before or a couple days before Tuesday. And I have my patrons vote on all the different choices. And whatever comes out on top is what I make the top 10 Tuesday video on. So in theory, if you want to be a part of this and help influence what top 10 videos come out, well, you can become a patron if you want, and that will help you do so. So I thank you to all of them for voting for this. Let me know what your thoughts are. Have you ever gotten, and I don't really want to talk homebrew make things either super great or super bad for you. But let me know, what do you think is the worst magic item in 5th edition? And by worst, I mean, like, this is kind of how I've seen it in my video here, is it costs me an attunement slot, one of my precious 3 attunement slots, and I don't really get a lot of bang for my buck for that attunement slot. Or even some of these magic items don't require attunement, and it's just like a first level casting of that spell is better than me. Like, if I can cast that spell, it's better for me to be able to cast Charm Person or Animal Friendship than it is for me to actually have this magic item that lets me do so. But anyway, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Sorry this video is now out on a Wednesday. You know, real life, man. Sometimes it happens. Hopefully I'll be back on track with a regular schedule as I'm starting to recover from my many, many night shifts. But thankfully, our folks have their power back on, so that's exciting. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.